He was healthy, and how did that happen? Our body is so complex that even some problem here and there could be too fatal. It's like a hole. Doesn't matter how great your ship is built. Like it's like a tank, but one hole is enough. It's that kind of thing. Kurzgesagt, and this is the best way to boost your immune system with science. My channel Kurzgesagt in a nutshell. Everything science. So yeah, sure, why not? Best way to boost your immune system, I don't know, vitamin C. Okay, yeah, see, immune system series from Kurzgesagt is really fun. I've seen a lot of videos from it, I guess, mostly in past year or two. I didn't know much about it, right? But seeing how complex it is, I mean, I always knew it's complex. You can't really picture it how complex it is before you actually see a simplified version of immune system by a channel like Kurzgesagt. I mean, how complex our bodies are. I mean, it's ridiculous to hear. Let's watch it.
There's this idea floating around that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, that surviving a disease leaves you better off. And it seems to make sense because we've all experienced this. When you go through hardship, often you come out more resilient, more ready to face a difficult situation in the future. But it turns out that sometimes what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. So what happens when you get sick?
Alright, a bit of that. I mean, obviously I work out, and what I've found is if I work out too intensely, which is most of the time, my immune system is kind of weaker than normally is. I mean, I literally felt this. I mean, I'm very prone to getting some common cold and things like that. I have to make sure that if I take a shower, I don't walk in front of AC or something, right? I've noticed that compared to when I don't. There has been time where I'm like busy with something else and I really didn't work out, right, for a month or so, barely, somewhat here and there, and I found out like I don't get sick at all. But when I work out intensely, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, eventually my immune system is really weak, right? So long term things like that, what doesn't kill you make you strong, that works long term. But if something is just attack you, like something like even common cold, right, some kind of a disease, some kind of a flu here and there, influenza, so influenza is still floating around the world, I guess, and obviously COVID or whatever. So any kind of disease, even smallest one, like simplest bacterial diarrhea or something, I don't know, any infection type of disease you get, it will leave you weakened. After that your immune system will be weaker, right? So people are always like, did you had something, doctors are like, did you just had something cold like that, did you just go through an antibiotic period or something, did you took antibiotics something, then your immune system is weaker. So what doesn't kill you make you stronger in long term, because like other videos from Kurzgesagt showed, RNA and things like that creates this kind of a defense mechanism for something they already got. So if you get some kind of a disease, it will remember in the future. So in that way you get stronger. But immediately, no, you're very weak.
The machinery of war. Think of yourself as a large country with a sizable army to defend it. You're surrounded by enemies that want to take your land, your energy, your resources.
The best analogy on this
is a matter of life and death, so your body evolved to be sensitive to damage and to the presence of enemies. Because this means that an invasion might happen at any moment and that it has to act fast. Let's start an invasion and see what happens. The moment your cells notice that something is off, they release an onslaught of signal proteins called cytokines. They're like air raid sirens that activate all sorts of immune cells that then themselves release many more cytokines, amplifying the alarm. Soon, you're flooded with signals that trigger precautions and countermeasures. Mobilization is
Who was that? I forgot that name. Who become really famous. Red coats are coming. His whole job was to run backwards and tell everybody that red coats are coming, British are coming. Well, his name is famous. How the fuck did I forget that? I don't know. Whenever I start recording, apparently whatever I remembered, somehow I forget. Because in my mind, I know I'm recording. Like I have to focus. So when I think like I have to focus, that's the time I forget shit. Otherwise, before recording, I just remember the name. Like, what the fuck?
Way. Your brain activates sickness behavior and reorganizes your body's priorities to defense. The first thing you notice is that your energy level drops and you get sleepy. You feel apathetic, often anxious or down, and you lose your appetite. Your sensitivity to pain is heightened and you seek out rest. All of this serves to save your energy and reroute it into your immune response. You become a country under attack, switching into a war economy, because properly activating your immune system is intensely disruptive and draining. Just like war is expensive for a country as industry switches to building tanks, your immune system demands huge amounts of energy.
Paul Revere. Yeah, that's the name. If you had asked me before the video, somebody just asked me, who's the guy whose whole job is to, tell townspeople riding on horseback that British are coming, I would have said that Paul Revere immediately. But somehow when I started recording, I forgot.
Acids and microelements to build its weapons. Take fever. It speeds up your metabolism and makes your cells work harder and faster while creating heat that's pretty stressful for many invaders, but it uses up a lot of calories to maintain. Then your immune system begins to clone millions of specialized immune cells to respond specifically to the enemy infecting you. B cells produce millions of antibodies every second, each requiring hundreds of amino acids to construct. Billions or even trillions of proteins need to be made to refresh the complement system, a minefield inside your blood. Cytokines, the mobilization and information signals, also need constant refreshing.
By the way, fever is kind of important when you want to beat certain type of illnesses. Nowadays, with the helicopter parents, if a fever of 99 and 100 happens, people suddenly just jump to like ibuprofens and acetaminophen or whatever you call it, right? Paracetamol. People suddenly jump like, let's just give that, it's 100 fever. It's 100, not 105. You need fever somewhat, right? To battle infection. And especially, and about fever, right? When you get like 104, 105 degrees or whatever, you start to get chills. So you feel cold, right? I'm pretty sure that's the case. So you want to, put on as much as blanket as you can, but that will raise your temperature even higher, which is like counterproductive, right? So it's really fucked up when you really think about it. Like if your temperature goes really high and you feel cold, you're not supposed to put on all these blankets and things because it will just raise your temperature even more higher to problematic level.
Usually, you acquire your resources by eating. But when you're sick, your body slows down your digestion because it needs a lot of energy you can't spare. So it reaches for the easiest source of amino acids and starts breaking down your muscles.
Yeah.
All that muscle that you worked so hard for is sacrificed to keep you alive. If you're young and healthy and fit, you'll
Don't pause too much, but yeah, if you want to, start to lift and get in fit shape, you need to worry about nutrition forever. After COVID, after 2020, past 2 years, I lost about 15 pounds of muscles or something. Right, I weighed 85 kilos. Now I'm like, 76, 75. And my fat percentage is kind of higher than it was during that time. So that's how much muscle I lost in past 2 years. Because I was, busy doing something else, just going through the, certain period in my life that, didn't find enough time to work out.
Cut for that quickly once you're better. But if you're old or very young, weak or suffer from chronic illness, this may be way too draining. Your body is literally consuming itself to keep the defense going. If your whole system is already strained, when you get sick, just keeping your immune responses going can overwhelm your capacities. Your immune system is a jerk. Our enemies too. Your immune system is as dangerous to you as it is to enemies. There's a very fragile balance between the damage caused by an infection and the collateral damage caused by immune cells. One of your first responders are neutrophils.
Alternative is worse,
Imagine
I guess.
crazy aggressive chimps with machine guns.
Yeah.
If a neutrophil encounters enemies, it showers them with chemicals that cut them open, but can also damage civilian cells, especially if the patient is already compromised, for example by smoking. On top of that, the microorganisms that invade you often release chemicals and toxins that can cause significant damage and cell death.
Okay, there is a place for that, but lots of time it's not needed, and it still panics and do that and damage our own self. That's why lots of medicine is to prevent that. It's like USA used very costly missile just to shoot down a Chinese balloon just recently. It feels like that. Like what the fuck? You didn't need to do that.
So a serious infection often causes many tiny wounds, literally holes in your organs. As you can imagine, it's not great to have holes and wounds in your organs, and your body rushes to close them. Your neutrophils and macrophages help by releasing chemicals that signal the body to start repairs, and most of the damage is quickly filled up with regrowing cells. But others are filled with collagen, a sort of fixal organic cement that gives your gooey tissue structural integrity. You've seen the result on your skin as scars. A scar is different from the original tissue. It has no functioning cells in it. It's like a sloppily applied cement patch. It can't do what the original tissue was doing. A scar on your heart makes it beat a tiny bit weaker. A scar on the lungs no longer captures oxygen. A scar on your liver makes it a worse filter.
Scar on the heart, that just feels a bit like, what the fuck? Because your heart is in a way delicate, right? And it has to pump like that, right? It has to have this kind of a fluidic movement to it. And imagine there's a tear in that, just panics you.
And so as you go through life and survive serious disease after serious disease, the functionality of your organs may decrease. The damage is usually small enough not to affect your quality of life, but can be permanent. Okay, this sounds depressing, but there is actually something you can do to avoid a lot of this damage
Really?
and train your immune system.
Is it depressing?
The best way to train your immune system. Your immune system is unique. Everyone has a slightly different immune system that's stronger against some enemies and weaker against others, which makes evolutionary sense.
By the way, your gut bacteria, that is important for immune system, right? Most people don't realize that, but that is extremely important. So people, when they go through the antibiotic phase, they're even more weaker because your broad spectrum antibiotic just destroyed even your immune system and gut bacteria basically. People say like science can't do shit already because it uses something like broad spectrum bacteria and things like that. Yeah, but that's the best we have. That's better than nothing. You can't just say like, oh, we can't go to the 12 billion light years of this galaxy because science ain't shit. That's not easy. Just like that, figuring things out, immune system, it's not easy as you would think. We still have, broad spectrum, antibiotic. That's big, right? That saves you from many things. Yes, it destroys you somewhat inside, but because it's like a carpet bombing thing, but it's still important.
As this protects our species from being wiped out by a single infection. Collectively, the immune system of the human species is a spectrum. Most people respond well enough to an infection, a few are super responders, and a few don't respond well and die.
Strong
Some
response,
people
that's
survive the Black Death, are more resistant to HIV or coronavirus, or even resistant against Ebola. Others are killed easily by the flu, or are highly vulnerable to certain bacterial infections. Where you are on this spectrum is impossible to predict, and you also respond differently to every possible infection.
Yeah, exactly. It's very.
This is why seemingly very healthy young people died from COVID, while for some elderly people, it was more like a mild flu. The idea that you...
it's mostly, our body is so complex. Like, if you have certain genetic problem that makes your heart a certain way weaker to certain things. Otherwise, you can just like run fast as you can. Your heartbeat goes highest as it can, and you're healthy all around. But it makes you weaker for certain things because of genetic issues. That alone is enough of a problem for something like COVID to be deadly. So there is way too many variables. He was healthy, and how did that happen? Our body is so complex that even some problem here and there could be too fatal. It's like a hole. Doesn't matter how great your ship is built. Like it's like a tank, but one hole is enough. It's that kind of thing.
You can weather all sorts of diseases if you never get a cold is wrong. You never know what your immune system is good at until it's tested.
Looks good. Let's go live.
Getting sick is a gamble in life's casino with your health on the line. Always. But there is something you can do. Hacking one of the best features of your immune system. When you survive a disease, usually you have better defenses against it afterwards. You gain memory cells that are very good at killing the specific enemy you fought that day. So you either don't get the disease again, or the next infection is much milder. And you can use an incredible achievement of human ingenuity
biggest example of that is, I think, chickenpox, right? Once you get a chickenpox, you're not going to get it again because your body will have a great defense against it. That's the case, right? I'm pretty sure. I mean, what are the chances of getting? I think people do get it second time, maybe. I guess there's always going to be variables. Most of the time, you will not get it. That's why lots of parents deliberately infect their children when they're young, because it's easier on young than older. If you get older and you get chickenpox, that's very problematic.
Taps into this mechanism to prevent damage from disease and train your immune system. Vaccines. Vaccines basically pretend to be a disease and train your defenses to be ready if it ever shows up for real. The goal is to create the same memory cells that you would get after surviving an infection. But if you can feel some side effects, why should you still do it? Nature versus Vaccine Dojo.
You don't want to pause too much, but again, this is the biggest issue people had. Nitpicking people, right? Vaccine deniers. This has COVID vaccine has some problem with it can give you inflammation of heart and things like that. Yeah, that's all true. And you should have all that information. And you should always weigh pros and cons. But nobody said vaccine is perfect. But vaccine do work. Nobody said vaccine work 100%. Nobody said COVID vaccine is just as effective as other vaccines. It's a vaccine. So people seeing these charts, picking small things, like see this has side effects. Doctors didn't tell me that. You think it's going to be perfect? What is in your life perfect? Give me one example of whatever you did or whatever you experienced was 100% perfect. It works, man, right? Of course, it has side effects. You should always ask your doctor or whatever to detail about what's the side effects and things. It's always good to be informed, but don't create this hysteria people who don't like vaccine is just going to go to different right-wing channels and just say vaccine is evil, this and that. It's not, right? Vaccines work. It helps.
You have two options to train your immune system: Vaccine Dojo and Nature Dojo. In Vaccine Dojo, you train with paper weapons and learn to defend yourself. Sure, you might get a black eye or a bruise. Sometimes after a vaccine, you get sick for a few days, but that's generally it. No scars, no permanent damage. We discussed vaccine side effects in detail in another video if you want to learn more. On the other hand, getting a disease to become immune means going to a Nature Dojo. In Nature Dojo, you train with real weapons, sharp knives and swords. Things might still work out, but with way more cuts and wounds. But from time to time, someone will die, be it a kid from measles or an adult from influenza. Nature Dojo is just...
Yeah, even if you don't die, if you go through a serious disease like, SARS, like you said, COVID, things like that, influenza, your immune system will be weaker from that point. Depends on your body, obviously. It depends on many factors, but there's a high chance your immune system from there on will be weaker.
Just way more risky. On top of that, the immunity you get from a vaccine is often better than the natural resistance because they're engineered to engage your immune system in a more productive way. Of course, vaccines are not magic, and sometimes they don't protect us as well as we'd like them to. Maybe because an enemy mutates too quickly, like the Omicron coronavirus, or because your specific immune system does not respond well to the vaccine and builds less of a defense. Still, being vaccinated is one of the best tools to train your natural defenses. In the end, if we look at the stunning progress humanity has made in the last century, eventually we may overcome disease for good. But until then,
yeah, seriously, people who doesn't appreciate vaccines is ridiculous, especially if you see past few centuries of trend. Do you have any idea how simplistic things used to kill people? The mentality of the people were just like how certain people just imagine dangerous areas, you can just die with a car crash. You don't think about your immune system that way. You don't think about small diseases that way. You're not going to be worried about something like polio and things like that because it doesn't exist. There's vaccines for that. Vaccines for too many things, right? But there used to be a time where people was afraid of many diseases and they knew there's a 50% chance or something you will probably die. There's always that given. That's not the case anymore. Not that diseases is gone. Diseases are still here. Super diseases are coming and everything. But as a general thing, right, you're not afraid of it normally.
We can do our best to take care of ourselves and others. Your body and your older self will be grateful to you. Diseases are not the only problem humanity can address if we work together. We believe the same is true for climate change, one of the main challenges of our generation. We're very passionate about this topic, and we've covered it extensively in previous videos. Humanity needs to tackle this problem on different levels of society, from governments and economies down to the individual. And there's one way you can take action now by working with our friends from Wren, who help you offset your carbon emissions. By visiting wren.co and answering a few questions, you can find out what your personal carbon footprint is. Your first step should be reducing your footprint, but there are limits to that. Wren lets you offset the rest of your carbon footprint with a monthly subscription that supports projects that plant trees, protect rainforests, and remove carbon dioxide from the sky. We think it's one of many puzzle pieces that can make a
Yeah, people, go to wren.co/Kurzgesagt and support this channel. Carbon capture, I'm pretty sure I've seen an article about that. I have to find some good videos on it, right? Like carbon capture, those are some, something like, it might not work perfectly or something like that. There's an issue with that or something. Not in, in the science of it, but the execution that people are doing, the way people are doing it might not be working great. I don't know how to find some videos about that. But yeah. Immune system, this is really good. Obviously you need vaccine. That's the point of this video. Vaccine is the best. I mean, we all knew that, right? You never contracted polio because you have a vaccine for it. Vaccine is the ultimate thing, but vaccine is not problem free. It's not 100% foolproof. It's gonna have side effects. Just because nothing has proven does not necessarily mean the vaccine doesn't cause big side effects. I know that, but still, vaccine is still your best option going forward. The new trend in the world, not just in science but in everywhere, is like taking a certain point of certain whole mass of information, taking a certain point and run with it. Like, see, this is the problem. Your media didn't tell you that, your news didn't tell you that, your science people didn't tell you that. See, that conspiracy theory crap. Just because you didn't have that information is not everybody's fault. Educate yourself more on that front. But in the end, whole evidence shows that it's good rather than bad. So go with that. People need to learn how to, take an information from all sides and make up their mind about it, right? Because you're going to have information on both sides, but which side, outweighs the other. Don't just pick certain information and run with it. Alright, well, if you like my next one, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.